programs running on your desktop, laptop, phone, whatever you got running. This program, audio and video components of it, take a lot of bandwidth, and if you've got other stuff running in the background, it could soak away that and break up the conversation. You may lose connection, etc. If you do lose connection, you can always hit the refresh button up by your address bar, so that little semicircle with an arrow on it, and you will have to then log back in. But if it's just a minute or two, there's no problem. If you do come late to class or away from your, or have logged out for more than half an hour at a time, that will impact your hours during class time. If it's during a break, it doesn't impact you if you log out and come back in. Only during class hours. If you have administrative questions, like where do I find a resource? How do I know about this? Where do I get that? What about a test? What about homework? All that stuff. You can easily go to recareercenter.com, look up the information, or you can wait until noon. And like yesterday and the day before, Lauren or Noel will jump on and ask any of your admin questions you will have. And they're very nice people. So please, if they do, when they do come on at noon, please stick around and ask the questions if you got them. Don't go away, do something, and come back and expect them to answer your questions, because it's quite probable they may have answered that question 2 or 3 times already, and it gets too repetitive, and they'll say, hey, you should have listened up before. So guys, stick around if you got questions at noon. They'll ask questions. They'll answer them. If you have any other questions about anything else in real estate you have a question about, or topics to discuss, you can always stick around until after the class is over. I stick around and answer any and all questions, so please feel free to do that. I will also supply my email address again at the end of every day. If you have a question or something you want to talk to me personally about, that's fine. We have break schedules. We have a 10:30 half-hour coffee break. We have a 1 hour 12 o'clock lunch break, and then we have another half-hour coffee break at 2:30 till 3 o'clock, and then we finish up the day at 4:30. And last announcement, as always, I always ask people to do the following. Number 1, please pre-read the chapters before you come to school. If you don't, it will be to your detriment. The folks that do pre-read their chapters have a better comprehension and understanding of the material. We spend less time on repetitive questions, and they have a higher level of retention of that information. By coming to school cold without knowing the information, you're left scratching your head after a conversation. You want to ask a lot of questions, which are pretty much self-evident in the text sometimes. So understand, guys. Boy, Sean, you can't wait till your first coffee break? Hang on, buddy. We're going to get there eventually. So please understand, guys, keep your questions pertinent to the topics being discussed. Please don't be repetitive, and please, I have to draw everyone's attention to this question or this comment. Please don't ask questions about what ifs. What ifs have no place in factual understanding. When we present topics for discussion, those are the topics that you're going to be tested on. The fact that there is a topic, there is a concept, you understand. But the what if scenarios are not going to be tested on. What if this happens? How does that affect that? The real estate test does not cover what ifs. So let's try to keep our talk and our questions directed to the information being presented. So I was planning on taking chapters 7, 18, 19 on Saturday, so I can leave after you finish chapter 16. You can do whatever you want, Dima. It's up to you. All right, was there any questions before I moderate the conversation, go over the homework from last night, and then present chapters 16, 17, 18? I will wait a minute for questions. And please don't keep your dialogue bar open if you're not asking questions. It just delays the class. Mo and Mary, you guys have your dialogue bars open. I suppose that you're asking questions, so I'll wait. No questions, just want to say good morning. Okay, is there anybody with any questions? Mo El Hindi, do you know that your dialogue bar is open and that we're waiting for your question? Or did you walk away and forget and left it open? Or do you actually have a question? I'm going to have to assume the guy walked away and doesn't know what's going on. So let's move on, guys. I'm sorry, but I have to moderate the conversation. We got a busy day today. So let's get busy. Let's go over the homework first from last night. Chapters 14 and 15. For your answers to the questions of the homework from chapter 14, the answers are as follows. For chapter 14, number 1 was A. Number 2, D as in dog. Number 3, B for boy. Number 4, C. Number 5, B for boy. Number 6, D as in dog. Number 7, A. Number 8, D as in dog. Number 9, C. And number 10, C. Once again, chapter 14 homework answers are number 1, A. 2, D, dog. 3, B for boy. 4, C. 5, B, boy. 6, D, dog. 7, A. 8, D, dog. 9, C. And 10, C. Once again, Mo El Hindi, do you know your dialogue bar is open? It looks like you're writing a novel or something. Please close your dialogue bar if you don't have any questions. Take your pointer or mouse off of your conversation tab. Mo El Hindi, are you with us? Or are you walking away from your machine and just letting it run? I'm going to have to assume Mo El Hindi is a ghost now. Okay. Chapter 15, homework answers are as follows. Number 1, C. 2, D as in dog. 3, B for boy. 4, B for boy. 5, C. 6, C. 7, B for boy. 8, B as in boy. 9, B as in boy. And 10A. Again, chapter 15 homework answers are number 1, C, 2, D as in dog, 3, B, boy, 4, B, boy, 5, C, 6, C, 7, B, boy, 8, B, boy, 9, B, boy, and 10A. I'll open it up. Was there any questions about the homework from last night? Not seeing any questions and thinking Mo El Hindi may have died. Somebody needs to call 911 and get a hold of Mo El Hindi and find out what's going on. So apparently you walked away and left his dialogue bar open. Dante, you have a question. What might that be? Is FNMA Freddie Mac? No, that's the federal. That's the Federal Mortgage Association, the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Association. It is not Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or Fannie Mae. All right, guys, I'm going to move on. Mr. El Hindi, your absence is obviously very apparent. So we're going to move on in spite of your dialogue bar being open. So I'm going to moderate the conversation, guys, and we do need to move on. To avoid looking foolish, guys, always be present. Always keep your dialogue bar closed unless you have a question. So let's move on. Unit 16, appraisals. Now, this is going to be an interesting topic because we're going to have to discuss things about what are value, market value, price, and all kinds of things. So at the end of this chapter, you should be able to describe the differences among various types of value and explain the 3 approaches to value. We're going to talk about what an appraiser does, the 3 approaches he uses to determine value, and you should also be able to discuss the profession of appraising in New Jersey. So let's get going and start moving on. First of all, understand the value of an item is set in the market that it is in. We, realtors, licensees, deal in the housing market and commercial space market. That's the market we deal in. Therefore, houses can be bought and sold in the housing market, obviously, and we can help establish prices to know what the market is doing. The market may be global, but in more reality, all real estate is local, so you need to know what your local markets are doing. You need to know the pressures that are put on markets, the various effects of various things that could occur in markets, and how that affects value. It is also advantageous for buyers and sellers to participate in the market by agreeing to buy and sell, which helps understand why markets set prices for certain items at certain rates. And those prices are not forever, because markets change, so does the proposition of value of items change. One of the largest influences on value is the idea of supply and demand. So we're going to talk about many things regarding value this morning, but what is the primary purpose of an appraiser? What does an appraisal give you? Well, by definition, an appraisal is an estimate or opinion of value. So the appraiser who comes to inspect properties, after he does his investigation, uses analytics to determine what an item in a specific market will get as far as value, and that determination is called his estimate or opinion of value. And there are different reasons why people have things appraised, which we'll explore in just a few minutes. But when someone is appraising real estate, there's two components to real estate. There's land, and there are improvements on the land. If you own real estate, you know that when you get your tax bill, your taxes are determined on the assessed value of, one part is the land, and the other part is the improvement, the house, the driveway, the deck, all that stuff. Those are improvements, man-made attachments to property. So we have to understand what is the difference between land and what's the difference between land and improvements. And we talked about that last Wednesday in chapter 5. So land, let's talk about land. Land, how does it have value? Well, number one, it's finite in its supply. After 27 years of real estate, guys, I am still looking for that land factory. Where can I go to get a new piece of land made so I can put it someplace that I can use it? Well, we don't have a land factory here in New Jersey. Hawaii does. Kilauea, Mauna Loa, when they start spilling out lava, they create new land and new territories that eventually will be used. However, we don't have that in New Jersey. So what is there remains. So land is finite in its supply in New Jersey. The contributing components to land's value is there any to buy? Depending on the type of land, there may be a large supply or a short supply. There's also the physical immobility of land. You can't take that lot and put it over there to increase its value. It's where it is and you can't move it. I've heard buyers tell me all the time, it's a shame we can't take that lot and put it over on that area and it would have a much better, well, you can't do that. Land is physically immobile. It's finite, you can't move it. It's also durable, lasts a very long time. Very long time, thousands and thousands, if not millennia of years. And each parcel is unique because of location and characteristics. There are some people, and I've done business with corporate transferees many times, who come to New Jersey and tell me, I'm told by my relo department that there are only a certain number of towns I should live in because they're more prestigious. Well, location is something you were probably taught since you were a tad. So one of the most important value contributors to land is its location. Now, people's preference and desire for certain locations is called situs, S-I-T-U-S. Probably should write that down as a vocabulary word, situs. So each parcel is unique. Each individual piece of property is called a parcel, as we said last Wednesday. And because each one is unique, each parcel has its own special characteristics. And the fifth contributor to value in land, it's usefulness to people. There's a piece of property, what can I use it for? Well, if it's a vacant, undeveloped acre in Bergen County, I think I could buy it and put up a high-rise with 170 condos and make $1 bazillion on the sale. Or I could use that same acre to farm. Or I could use that same acre for a couple different residential properties. There's many different uses for property, and we use property many different ways. So the 5 attributes of land are finite in its supply, its physical immobility, it's durable, each parcel is unique, and it's useful to people. Mo, did you get back, and are you willing to close out your dialogue bar yet? Or are we still going to make fun of you? And was there any other questions? Sherry, you have a question, no? Mo El Hindi, did you wake up yet? And please take off your dialogue bar. Situs is people's preference and desire for certain locations. That's what situs is, S-I-T-U-S. There's a definition terminology guide in the back of the book that'll help you. I'm afraid Mr. Mo El Hindi may have passed away while we're discussing and has now entered the nether regions because he's no longer apparently present in our discussions. Repeat, guys, listen, please. Okay. R.I.P., right, Jesus? Situs is people's desire and preference for certain locations. That's I don't want to repeat, guys. So that's good enough, I think, for a definition. Was there any other questions about what we've discussed? Yes, Cynthia, it's on the bottom of page 274, last paragraph. All right, not seeing any more questions and fearing the worst for Mr. El Hindi, we're going to move on. Now, supply and demand. What's that? Well, if you have ever taken a course in economics, or maybe you haven't. Well, if you did, or whether you didn't, let me tell you, supply and demand is probably the largest influencer on value. Let's consider, and I'm going to use a whiteboard, and I don't want to be your college professor and do this all over again, but for those of you who don't really grasp the supply and demand, let's do this. Supply. There's the supply. It's steady. It's constant. There's always a number of items available as a supply, and we're using houses. There's always houses to buy. However, there's also demand. Demand is not a constant thing. In fact, demand changes in the marketplace, and so does the supply. Right now, supply is running very low, and demand right now is running very high. What does that mean? Since the supply is low and demand is high, people will pay more money for that supply because it's limited. So the value of the supply goes up as demand increases, but supply does not. Right now in the housing markets in New Jersey, we have a very limited supply of houses, but a very large demand for those houses, which means when houses come on the market, they usually sell for more than their asking price because of the demand in the marketplace and the limited supply. The other thing could hold true, where demand now goes down. In that case, the cost of supply must go down to meet the demand of the market. There's 10 million homes for sale and only a few buyers. In order to sell those houses, they have to cut their prices so that the lowest price items usually sell first. If you're in retail, you know this to be true because you just got a shipment of sweaters in at the end of, I don't know, July for the fall inventory, and nobody bought them. So what did you do? Since the demand is low, you dropped the price. You had a sale, cut the price so people thought it was a better deal, and then they might buy. So supply and demand, the supply is the amount of goods offered for sale within a marketplace at a certain time. The demand is the number of people willing to buy or accept those goods at any price during a given time. So one directly influences the other. Now, there are people who say that it's all about supply, and people sometimes say it's all about demand. Well, together, folks, they help understand. Oh, Mr. El-Hindi came back to life. Let's call him Lazarus. Thank you for rejoining us and closing out your dialogue bar. We appreciate it. Miracles do happen, folks. So supply and demand are integral in understanding how one affects the other. Very important, and it's the largest influencer on value in any marketplace. Do I have any questions from anybody? Well, all praise Jesus that Mr. El-Hindi is still with us. Thank goodness. Lazarus. Okay, anybody else with a question? Not seeing any. Let's move on. All right. Now, the real estate market, where buyers buy and sell real estate. It is said that the real estate market is an inefficient market. Now, I'm no economist, guys, and I'm no great business-minded person. But I have to understand that markets for real estate are not efficient, meaning the car market, the clothing markets are efficient markets because you can take one product, offer it anywhere, and get the same price typically. But real estate is immobile. You can't just pick it up and put it other places. You want to buy a nice brand new 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath center hall colonial with 2-car garage, half-acre property? Well, in Plano, Texas, you can get one for $250,000. But in New Jersey, you probably have to spend somewhere upwards of $500,000 to $700,000 for that same house. What? Because of location and the fact that that real estate is immobile. That means pricing is specific to the market it's in. House prices vary greatly across the United States. Because real estate is immobile, you can't just pick it up and take it with you and transplant it. Well, in some cases you can. If you got enough money, you can, move a house. But that the land then becomes the issue. So understand, guys, real estate is immobile, making the market inefficient. And the fact that is each parcel in real estate is unique. There's no cookie cutter pressing out land and houses that are all exactly the same. Every piece of property, every parcel of real estate is unique. It may look and act and have similar value than another, but every parcel is unique. And it is very slow to adjust to changes in the supply and demand market. A year ago, housing markets were doing very well. Today, they're white hot here in New Jersey. I got to tell you, I live in a small town, Oakland, New Jersey. It's in Bergen County. And we only have a certain number of homes available at any time for sale. Normally, if a buyer comes into the area, they have several homes to choose from to make a decision. Right now, as soon as a house comes on the market, there's 4 or 5 offers and the house sells for over asking price. And buyers are getting frustrated because of limited inventory. So nowadays, whenever they see a pop-up on their notification that a house just came on the market that meets their criteria, they call their broker, email their broker, say, put in an offer immediately for $30,000 over asking price, no contingency, see if we can get it. Bizarre, because it's slow to adjust to the price of supply and demand until those effects are felt, then a reaction occurs. You've heard of buyer's markets, where there's an overabundance of homes on the markets, and buyers have their choice and can pretty much negotiate to their detriment a lower price for buying it. But a seller's market like we have today in New Jersey, where very few homes are on the market, sellers, hey, you don't want to pay full price? I'll just wait for the full price because it's going to come in. They can take their time and get their price if they want, but they're slow to react because the demand issue sometimes comes on us like a tidal wave. We're not prepared. It did that just less than a year ago, around about June or July. All of a sudden, houses disappeared from the market. They got gobbled up overnight. Believe it or not, New Jersey has more people leaving the state. We have the highest number of people selling homes and leaving the state, moving out of state. They're going other places. The reason is, number one, taxes are ridiculous. However, there are people coming into our state from higher tax states like New York, Pennsylvania, or New York primarily, especially Manhattan and the Bronx and things, where they're living and the costs are extreme. And there's also social unrest and all kinds of other issues. They're flooding into New Jersey and gobbling up any homes that are available because of the COVID-19 and all those effects. So right now, markets are working inefficiently because there's not enough supply to meet the demand. Until they build new houses, a good number of them, which takes time, the market's very slow to react to that demand charge. The only effect they can immediately see is that prices go up tremendously. So when supply increases, prices typically drop, and when demand increases, prices will rise. All right. Apparently there's a question or two, so let me open up real quick. What's the questions? Or not? Or yes? Not sure. Should I stay or should I go? Not seeing any questions. Oh, what happens now with COVID and foreclosures? That's anybody's guess, Luciana. What's going to happen when this COVID crisis finally comes to an end? What's going to happen when eviction moratorium finally comes to an end? What's going to happen when mortgage foreclosure moratoriums finally come to an end? It's anybody's guess. I will tell you this. There's going to be blood in the streets, and investors are going to be out with a flush supply of cash looking to make deals. I honestly believe that. But again, there's no prognostication on my part or say this is going to happen because this is all new territory. There's no way I can predict what's going to happen. So maybe it might be a good idea to stash all your cash and get ready for a tidal wave, a tsunami of foreclosures and evictions coming down the pike. It just may be more than we can handle. But again, that's a speculation. I don't know. Maybe they'll just do all debt forgiveness. I don't know. So we'll see what happens. Can value stop rising when a bank will not mortgage? Not necessarily. Okay, guys, I'm going to move on. Thanks for the questions. Good ones. So then, what is value? And how do we know what a good value is? Well, our conversation from now until about, I don't know, the coffee break is going to center around what is value. So let me ask you a question. I'm not going to open it up for discussion. It's one of those pondering questions. So here's the question. You ladies, whoever got engaged and got a ring from your beau, What is the advice they gave you as soon as you got that ring? Better get it appraised in case something happens and get it insured. So you go down to your jeweler and you are all glowing with your new rock. And the jeweler says it's amazing what they're doing with CZs now, right? And oh, what? No, I'm kidding. But the jeweler's going to ask you one question. What is the purpose of the appraisal? And you say, what? And he says, do you want a replacement policy for insurance purposes? Or do you want a replication policy for insurance purposes? And you say, what's the difference? Well, if you want a replacement policy, that costs you X amount of dollars based on the current value of your ring, which means you go down to your corner jeweler, pick out a ring from the counter that has the same monetary equivalent, and that's your replacement ring. So that's a replacement policy. But if you want to get a replication policy, that's going to cost you more. Why? Because we're going to have to make the ring to be exactly like the one you have. The same stone, color, clarity, carats, and the cut, clarity, and carats. Then it's got to be in the same exact ring and mounting. So we're going to have to make that to size and then create the clasps to be exactly like the ring was. It's going to cost more money to make. So therefore, your replacement policy is going to your replication policy is going to cost more than a replacement policy. So there's greater value in replication than there is in replacement. Did anybody not understand what I'm talking about here, or have a question? Not seeing any. Moving on. So value is the monetary equivalent of something's worth. Now, I have in my career and my life bartered. What? Tim, I need you to sell the property, but I don't have enough cash to pay a commission. Would you do it if I pave 2 or 3 residential driveways for you? Now I may have a value proposition that I would consider. Now you're going to pave something and I'm going to sell your house. So that paving has to have a monetary equivalent to the amount of money I would have charged. And if it does, maybe I can make a deal with you. I'm not saying you're going to do this. I'm just giving you an example here to think about. So value is the monetary equivalent of something's worth. Now, value does not rise in proportion to inflation or cost of living. Quite often, let's say cost of living on average is 3% per year. And it's a very steady usual cost of living increase. In some markets, houses like right now are raising 30% per year. 3% per year cost of living increase, 30% rise in value of homes, that doesn't relate at all to each other. Cost of living could be going up 3%, but the demand on houses has ceased and values start to go down. There's no interactive value proposition with each other. Therefore, inflation may have nothing to do with certain real estate markets because of supply and demand. So understand there's different terminology being discussed. There's price, there's cost, and there's value. The price of an item is its current monetary equivalent. That's the current monetary equivalent, is the price you would pay for something. The cost maybe occurred 20 years ago when I created that or built that house. A different value proposition at that time would have a different price at that time, which means it cost me that much then. But today, if you want it, your price would be a lot more. So cost relates to the past, price relates to the current, present, and value may be a future-looking thing. People buy houses for different reasons. One of the main reasons people buy houses is the fact that they trust the markets to be good to them and that in the future, its value will increase. So if I buy something today at today's dollars and sell it tomorrow at tomorrow's dollars, I'll make a profit on it. So it's worth the value proposition of buying it today and reselling it tomorrow. So, according to our text, there are 4 economic characteristics of real estate, and they are DUST, D-U-S-T. D, demand, U, utility, S, scarcity, and T, transferability. We already talked about demand. We already talked about scarcity, that's the supply side. But utility, what does that have to do with real estate? A lot. So I'm looking to build or get a piece of property where I can put, let's see, a 150 unit condo complex. So I'll shop around and I find out, hey, there's a vacant piece of property. It's zoned heavy industry. Well, unless I hire an attorney and fight the zoning to see if I can get it rezoned for residential, it's going to cost me time and money, and I may not be successful. Therefore, the utility of the land as it sits today has very little value to me because it's not zoned for the appropriate use I want to use on that property. Therefore, I would have to put extra money and time and aggravation, most likely, to try to rezone it. And if I'm unsuccessful, I lose money. But if I'm successful, then the land has great utility to me because I can use it for the intended purpose of buying it for. But if I can't, then why would I buy it? In fact, that's less value to me as a developer as the way it's zoned. I wouldn't want to buy it. It's not even worth the dollars I would even think about paying for it. So utility is very important to understand. Can I use it for the purpose I intend to buy it for? And if not, what's it going to take to get there if I can? So if it's easy to use out of the box kind of thing, I could open it up and use it. It has greater utility to me, I'd pay more for it. But if not, I'd pay less for it or wouldn't even buy it. So utility is what can I use the property for and what will it take for me to use that property? Transferability. What does that mean? How easy is it for me to acquire ownership of that property? Well, let's think about it. The property's tied up in legal action through a suit for partition amongst the owners, so there's a problem that's on the title, and I have to wait for that to be cleared up. Also, there's a lot of debt attached to that property, so they're going to have to somehow get money to pay off that debt, and then they could transfer the property. It also has a lot of encroachments of neighbors putting things across. They have to spend money to remove those through legal actions. There's a lot of easements. In other words, it's going to be hard to transfer that property with a clear title to me unless you spend a lot of money and time cleaning up the problems. It has less transferability to me. I can't use it right away. Therefore, it has less value to me than if I could buy something out of the box right away without any problems. Transfers easily, I'll pay more for it. So real estate, again, through demand, utility, scarcity, and transferability, the 4 economic characteristics of land or real estate, is important to understand. Was there any questions? There is. Okay, I'll wait, Craig. Can value stop? I did answer that. I'm sorry, that was the Mo's question. I don't know who Mo has a question. Was there any serious questions before I move on? And I'm not seeing any, so let's move on. All right. Now, market value. What is the price that a ready, willing, and able buyer who's not forced to buy and a ready, willing, and able seller who's not forced to sell, what is the price they would agree to? Well, first of all, that presupposes something. If you've ever been in marketing or advertising, one of the main topics they try to instill in your head is that an item will sell when price meets exposure. Therefore, you have to expose an item to the proper buying pool so that they know about it and then will buy it. And if it's priced right and they deem it a good value, you have a winning product to sell in the market introduced it to. But if people are under pressure or duress, then market value may be construed to be slightly different. Let's take an example of a seller. He knows that every day, if he sold his house in a normal market, he can get $500,000 for it. However, that seller was just divorced and the judge ordered a decree to sell the house in 30 days. And now he's under pressure, undue pressure or influence to get rid of the house quickly. So he puts it on the market for $500,000. Someone comes across and says, hey, you know what? I'll pay $425,000 for that house. That seller normally would say, no, there's other offers that'll come in for a much higher price and I'll wait it out. But instead he says, sold. What? That buyer just got a good deal and got a better value for his dollar spent on that real estate because the seller was under pressure and had to sell quickly. Therefore, he did not realize its true market value. So understand, ready, willing, and able means you're not under pressure. You're not in a hurry. You're just casually investigating the market. And then when you see something, negotiating a price with the owner. And if you agree, then you buy it. So market value can also infer that the buyer and seller are unrelated to each other, that they're, quote, strangers. That's called an arm's length transaction, when people are not related to each other, they're just strangers, and they are ready, willing, and able. Why do I say that? Because think about it. I'm going to sell my house to my son. My son's going to expect some sort of family discount so he doesn't have to pay full market value. I'd probably give him a nice big discount. In fact, I might even sell him for $1. Does that mean that house is only worth $1? No, because the market would pay an excess of X amount of dollars for it, maybe $500,000 or $600,000 for it. But he got it for $1. Man, did he get a good value? Well, yeah, he did, because he got the family discount. A market value is achieved when relative strangers interact and agree to buy. So property must have a reasonable amount of exposure in the market. The value is the most probable price that property will bring in that market. And value, as I said, is the cash or monetary equivalent of the value of the item. And the buyer and seller are not acting under any undue pressure. All right, let's move on. Now, when it comes to appraising, certain terms you have to understand. Number one, appraisal, as I said, was an estimate or opinion of value. Now, I've also said to folks, it may also be a conclusion of value. And as we'll discuss later this morning, how an appraiser does his job, sometimes they have to do more than one way to approach value. And if so, they may have two competing value propositions that they must rectify and then conclude a cohesive value proposition to the client. So an appraisal technically is an estimate, opinion, or value. Should it be an unbiased opinion or estimate of value? Well, therein lies the rub, doesn't it? Because opinion infers that someone's going to have a thought about it. Can appraisers, those who are licensed or certified under state law, influence appraised values? Yes, they can. Is that good? I can't answer that question. I'm not an appraiser. However, as a realtor, I hate to see appraisers trying to influence markets. I don't think they should be doing it. Sometimes appraisers intentionally underestimate value, or maybe in today's market, intentionally overestimate value just to make the sale. Is that a good thing to do? In my opinion, no, but that's my opinion. And that doesn't count for a hill of beans in the real estate appraisal markets. So an appraisal is an estimate or opinion of value. An appraiser can either be an independent person who's trained to provide unbiased estimates, and what they call a fee appraiser, independent. Or you could have a staff appraiser. A staff appraiser is usually hired by the FHA or VA and only appraise properties for those purposes. A fee appraiser is like a hired gun. Anybody can hire them for any purpose whatsoever. And appraising is the profession of providing value for a fee. Realtors are not appraisers. We do not charge fees for giving our opinions of value, called CMAs, comparative market analysis. Remember, I trained you slightly in that practice last week. I'm going to go a little more in depth when we talk about the appraiser's value propositions and how it is similar to the real estate appraisal, or the CMA rather. So an appraisal is an estimate, opinion, or value, and it's a report that a person must pay for. An appraiser is someone who's licensed or certified by a state to provide unbiased estimates of value, a fee appraiser or a staff appraiser. And an appraising is the art of valuing items. All right, so are there any questions about these items we just discussed, or should we move on? A couple questions I see being typed. But not sure if there's any questions. Can you not listen to an appraiser and list your house for whatever price you want? Dante, I'm going to address that conversation just a second. How did appraisal make 2008 happen? Boy, that's a conversation that's way too long for this discussion right here. Sorry, I can't answer that question in the next minute or two, Gary. So CMA is the realtor's opinion of value. Is a realtor's opinion of value, yes. Can you be both a certified real estate agent and a certified appraiser? Yes, but you should never appraise the property that you're getting a commission for selling. That would be a conflict of interest. And you have to state in your, you have to have all clients' work that are involved in a transaction allow you in writing to do more than one service in one transaction. That's another licensing issue. What happens with the dollar sale of a home? How does that affect CPM and sales tax? That's another discussion outside the realm of licensing, guys. We can have drinks one day, Mindy, if you wanted to talk about that. It's more than a minute conversation. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to answer that in the time allotted. So, and really has nothing to do with the terms that you need to understand to pass the test. Is there a conflict of interest being an appraiser of a property you are selling? Absolutely there is, Joseph. Because you have a more influential input on the value. How is appraiser different from appraising? An appraiser is pretty much a person. An appraisal is a report. And the appraising is the act of valuing. CMA, comparative market analysis, Kara, we're going to talk about that in another chapter and maybe a little later today. Don't agents act like appraisers all the time? No, we don't charge for our services. In fact, in our CMAs, it must specifically state this is not an appraisal and we don't charge for our services. So if my agent versus my appraiser have different opinions of the value, always go with the appraiser. I'm not saying that, nor would I ever infer that. So no, I can't answer that question the way you probably want me to answer it. So here's the thing, guys. Appraising And what was the question I said to get back to on? I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't see it. There's a limit on number of appraisals on a single property. Whatever you'd like to pay for, Robert, you can get $1 million done, but you got to pay for them. They're usually several $100s a pop. Can an appraiser be challenged? Absolutely. You can get your own appraisal to counter it. Are you obligated to one appraiser, or can you get a second? You can get a second and sometimes even a third. All right, I'm going to move on. Good questions, though. All right. We said value is the estimated based on analysis. I can give someone a pretty good idea of the value of the property, meaning what would a normal buyer in a regular market pay for such a item. In the current market conditions, I'm going to tell them they'll slightly overpay just to get it. So maybe we can come in with a value proposition that's slightly higher than if demand wasn't so high. What's the price? The price is what somebody actually pays for something. And the cost may be relevant only for new construction. So if I just built a house, I know what my costs are. Therefore, the price I'd sell it for would be directly related to the cost. I'm going to use the cost and the profit margin to determine the price that I will bring, or the value I want to bring. The price is what I negotiate with the buyer to sell it for. All right. Now, for the next rough half hour or so, we're going to talk about basic principles of value. I will stop from time to time and ask your input or questions, so don't worry. But here's the first one: highest and best use. A value proposition must include what is the property used for, and is that the right use? Would a residential house be best suited to be placed in the middle of an industrial complex? Of course not, Tim. It would be worth practically nothing. Exactly. So that piece of property where that house is on is not being used for its highest and best use. But if I put an R&D or manufacturing facility on that land, that would bring the highest sale price because it's being used for its proper use. So highest and best use says it's the most profitable use and will generate the highest return as far as money goes to that owner when sold, because it's being used for its highest and best use. One of the principles of appraisers that the appraiser must determine is the property being used for its highest and best use first. And if it is, then I can go ahead and appraise it. If not, then I have to discount value because it's use. Then there's the principle of substitution. So here's a cul-de-sac. Pardon my drawing. But there are 3 lots at the end of this cul-de-sac, all relatively the same, 1, 2, and 3. All the same size, all an acre. And each lot has a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath colonial home on it, and they're all brand new. Which means the principle of substitution, if I buy this property, I should probably spend about the same price if I were to acquire this property or this property. In other words, I could substitute one for another because they're all very similar. They're not exactly the same. This guy faces east, this guy faces west, this guy faces north. So there's differences in orientation on the property, and that alone could add or subtract the value to some buyers. I learned this a long time ago. I had a house in Hawthorne for sale. It was a beautiful brick colonial, and the front of the building and the front door faced directly due east. When I had my first open house, I had a good number of people from an Asian culture come to see the house and make multiple offers on the property. I didn't think there was going to be that kind of demand for this house, except for the fact in some Asian cultures, the art of feng shui, the flow of energy through a property is highly desirable. And if a house faces east, that means when you open the front door, the rising sun brings in energy into the house and flows throughout the house. If you have a disjointed floor plan, the energy doesn't flow very well. This one had a very open floor plan, and according to the Asian buyers, had excellent feng shui, the movement of qi, energy, throughout the house, and made it desirable for them to buy. So cultural interpretations of certain direction pointings of houses can have and subtractive, can add and subtractive value, believe it or not. You have to pick up these things about cultural influences on value in your practice if you aren't aware of them, and know that different cultures place different value propositions on properties because of things like direction, condition, color. If there's water in or on the property, there's all kinds of inferences of value. And those are nebulous items we can't touch, but they're there and they influence value. But getting back to the proposition of substitution, every one of these houses, 1, 2, and 3, should roughly sell for the same price because they're all exactly the same, all the lots are the same, and everything's the same. But if all 3 houses are for sale at one time, usually the one that drops its price first gets sold first, because you're getting a better value for that one compared to the other 2. Did anybody not understand the principle I'm trying to convey here? Or have a difficulty understanding what I was trying to draw? Evie, you had a problem. What's your question? But house 3 sells more than the other 2 because of supply down, right? I'm sorry. Because of supply. I'm not understanding the question, Gary. Can you advertise the facing east to certain markets? You could if you want to. Why is it value and not price? Price is what someone pays for it. Value is what we expect in a normal market to sell for. The price is the actual sales price. I could ask 500 in normal market. If everything was right, I should be able to get it. But price is negotiated down to 498. Well, guess what? Value and price are only $2,000 apart, but they are still different. Can you increase the price of the last house? I assume by adding amenities and adding things, you can increase its value. Price is part of value. Got it. It's common belief for some people that if the house faces a certain direction, it can be either auspicious, favorable to success light, or inauspicious, not favorable. Okay, agreed. Meaning house number 1 and 2 sell, leaving only 3 left to sell. Okay, so house number 3 can sell for more because it's the only one left. Supply and demand dictate that, Gary, yes. So hopefully that quantifies or qualifies your question. Was there anybody else with a question before I move on? Christopher Cannon, did you have a question? The development my father lives in, the houses in the middle of the lots went first, and the houses on the curves went last and sold for more. There you go, supply and demand. Okay, Michael, you had a question? Would an appraisal change when only one of those 3 properties is available? It's quite possible because of supply and demand, Michael. But again, I'm not saying definitely. I don't know what the rest of the market conditions are like in that area. So it could, yes, it could, very easily could. All right, Remy, one more question before we move on. Mo, I hope you're doing well. All right, I'm going to moderate the conversation and move on. You guys crack me up. Other principles of value, supply and demand. We talked about that. I don't think we need to revisit that and rediscuss it. Conformity, however, is something we do want to discuss. Now, every October, the little woman and I take our trip down to Hilton Head and vacation on a beautiful sand-covered beach with gorgeous sunrises, and we just love Hilton Head. Maybe thinking about looking at it as a retirement community in the near future. But the fact is, every fall we go down and we stay in the same place and we just love it. But when we go down, we don't go down Route 95 or fly down. We usually take 95 or so when we get to, well, I'm sorry, we don't even take 95. We take the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel route and go down the coastal route through the lowlands, the low country, and the Carolinas. If you've ever been to the low country, it's a beautiful place in the country. The low country has their own type of cuisine that's very desirable, and barbecue very desirable. But they have no conformity in their neighborhoods. You may be driving down a route that has a pig farm, 120-acre pig farm on this side, stinks to high heaven, but that's what's allowable. And across the street, there's a shopping plaza. Next to that, there's a small airport. And across the street from that, next to the pig farm, is a mega mansion with a heliport on it, a lake, and a 6-car garage, and it's like 6 acres big. And across the street from him, next to the airport, is a broken down double wide with 3 washing machines on his front yard. I mean, that's the reality of the lowland, the low country, where non-conformity is a norm. Therefore, how do I set prices on those properties when nothing conforms to each other? Very hard to infer property values when nothing conforms. Let's take the opposite. Now, if you're familiar with New Jersey, there's a town in New Jersey called Fair Lawn, New Jersey. In Fair Lawn, New Jersey, only a few miles from where I'm sitting, is a subdevelopment in Fair Lawn called the Radburn section, R-A-D-B-U-R-N, Radburn. And in the Radburn section, every house was built to be just like the one next door. In fact, throughout the Radburn section, there are brick-built 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath Cape Cods with a 1-car attached or maybe detached garage on half-acre lots. And every house is the same. Every lot is the same. By driving down one street, all the houses are the same. You make a corner, you turn the corner, and down that street, every house is the same again, just like the street you want. So it's deja vu all over again. Meaning the whole neighborhood conforms with each other, so prices stabilize because of conformity. Now, recently, homeowners associations have been allowing people to start making modifications to their property, adding rooms, different colors, finishes, coverings, and all kinds of things. So conformity, even though it's starting to change, all those houses are basically still the same. 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath Cape Cods, brick built, little pink houses, right? John Cougar Mellencamp. So everything's the same. Conformity rules. All prices remain stable and equivalent throughout the entire area because of conformity. So you get one hand, unconformity or conformity. One has no way to actually price properties except by finding out what buyers are willing to buy. The other one, we already know the prices before we get there because they all are the same. So any questions about conformity or anything like that? And by the way, if you've ever been to Long Island, Hempstead is the same. Hempstead, New York, they were built all ranches, all the same, very similar. So is it Jala, Patasia? Yeah. Levittown, there you go. Thank you, not Hempstead, Levittown. You're right, Stephen, it's Levittown. Do we need to know how non-conforming neighborhoods do set their, do we need to know how non-conformity neighborhoods do set their price value? Trying to understand your question, Kira. Let me think about your question. Do we need to know how to set prices in non-conforming neighborhoods? Yeah, your broker's going to train you on how to do that, if that's your question. Okay, good. I live in a neighborhood where most houses are the same. However, my street is a mix of houses, maybe 6 different types. How does the value of houses on my street get set? Good question, Mindy. Hold on that question, because it's going to come down to the appraiser or real estate agent comparing your house to other houses in the entire town. Maybe neighborhood specific, but similar throughout the entire town. So it's not just about your local street, it's about the entire neighborhood and sometimes the entire town that has to be considered. We're going to go into more specifics on that later, but good question. All right, I think I answered the question, so let's move on. The principle of regression and progression. You may have heard from people that you should buy the least expensive property in an area, in a neighborhood. No one ever says buy the most expensive and audacious house in a neighborhood. They always say you should buy the least expensive priced house in the neighborhood. Why? Because you have a better chance of getting a better return on your investment than you would if you bought the most expensive house in a neighborhood. Let's do a comparison here. I'm going to use a whiteboard just to try to illustrate my point. Here's a neighborhood. Streets come through, side streets, right? There's streets all over the place. And every house in this neighborhood is a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath, center hall colonial with a 3-car attached garage. They're all 2,800 square feet, and they all are on acre properties. And all those properties are $1 million roughly equivalent. Except this one little house in the neighborhood on a similar sized 1-acre lot than everybody else. His property is the same size as everybody else, but he's got a 2-bedroom bungalow house that's been there since 1927. And it doesn't have updated electric or plumbing. In fact, it still has an outhouse on it. Is that going to be worth buying in this mega mansion neighborhood of $1 million properties? Quite possibly it's the best investment in the neighborhood. Why? Because with not too much money, you can invest in upgrading the house to be more desirable. And because it's in a neighborhood of higher priced homes, the price of this home tends to rise through minor improvements and major improvements because it's in a more desirable area. So you have a progression happening of price by buying the least expensive property, putting some money in it, and increasing its value tremendously. And when you sell, you get a much better return on your investment. But the opposite could also take effect. In the same neighborhood, right? All these streets are coming off the main thoroughfare or whatever. And here's the houses in an area, right? And they're all similar size lots and everything else. And they're all 2-bedroom bungalows, except this lot has a 5-bedroom, 3.5 bath mega mansion put on it. Well, in this neighborhood, that's out of place. It doesn't conform. Therefore, people would typically pay less for this house in this neighborhood than they would in a neighborhood of equal size homes. So the price generally does not increase with the other neighborhoods. It tends to stagnate or even go down because of its location in the neighborhood where it doesn't conform. So you get a worse return in your investment for buying the most expensive house on a block. That's called regression. Did anybody not understand the principle of regression or progression? Not seeing any questions. Let's move on. Anticipation. Yes, anticipation. Why do people buy houses? Several reasons. They need a place to live, right? Good. In the 1990s, when I was selling houses, it was more of we fell in love with the house and want to buy it. Today, the questions being asked are, will this house perform when I need it to resell, and will I get a good return on my investment? So people are buying real estate with the fact that it's an investment in mind now. So people buy real estate anticipating a couple things. Number one, that I'll make money on the resale. So it's a good thing that I buy it. Or if I buy it and put a little money into it, I can make a lot of money when I resell it. So I'm going to anticipate a nice gain on my investment today. Or I buy a house to live in it, but I get certain tax benefits through ownership. I get to write off mortgage interest as well as my property taxes up to $10,000 to reduce my income. So I'm going to anticipate a tax savings from buying real estate. Or I buy investment properties for appreciation, tax saving write-offs, and possibly cash flow, generated income from property that I buy. So people concerned with buying properties and the generated cash they make anticipate getting profit by buying today and selling at a higher price later, generating cash incomes, tax write-offs, and things like that. So anticipation can add to a concept of value. There's a principle of increasing and diminishing returns. At some point, people can over-improve their property. I've seen people do $100,000 landscaping improvements on their property. Will they get that money back when they resell the house? They're going to get some of it back, but no, they're not going to get all that income back. So at some point, they added a little too much landscaping and over-improved the lot and will not get back that amount of money. Or people add rooms onto houses, add levels for different purposes. But at some point, you may over-improve your property where you're not going to get that value back on resale. Just because you like it doesn't mean the population likes it. That's a hard conversation to have with a seller who has done all kinds of custom work in their property, put a lot of money into it, and expects the buying public to like what he did. The fact is, he may be very unique in his taste, and no one digs what that guy did. Therefore, he over-improved his property for the market conditions he's in and won't get that money back when he resells. People ask me all the time, Tim, where should I invest money in my property? Everybody has the same advice. Oh, kitchens and baths, which are the money rooms, and yes, you need to have those done. But my first question is this: how's the structure of the property? And what condition is the roof in? I don't care if you add an $80,000 kitchens and two $20,000 bathrooms. If you don't have a good roof, it's going to get destroyed by water infiltration, and mold will grow, and it'll be not worth nothing. If your foundation is cracked and the house is starting to tip, I don't care if you put $1 bazillion into that house. Unless you fix the foundation, it's going to fall down and your investment just went out the window. So what is a good investment in property? Number one, foundations, roofs, that kind of stuff. Very important because it'll ensure the integrity of the dwelling inside. Then curb appeal adds value, believe it or not. According to the National Association of Realtors, a questionnaire went out in the buying public a year ago. The results? Buyers believe that good curb appeal could add as much as 17 to 21% of value on property. So how does your house look from the street? Is it old and worn? Are the shrubs overgrown? Is the grass not being cut? Are limbs falling and you're not picking them up? Or are you manicuring your property so that when people see it, they say, ooh, that's more desirable. That's more of a manpower issue. It doesn't take a lot of money to cut the grass, trim your hedges, or do anything else, but could bring back quite a return on your spend of just a few dollars to maintain your property. When telling people when they're selling their house, they're like, well, how should we stage the house? Well, first of all, some houses need a lot of work, some don't. I actually walked into a house in Clifton one time. This is interesting. When I walked in the front door, it was automatically dark and dingy, a lot of heavy window covering treatments, dark paint, cluttered atmosphere, a lot of chairs and couches and tables and things cluttered about. And the woman's like, should I spend a lot of money and have a stager come in? I said, here's what we can do. If you don't mind, I have a couple high school kids that are looking for community service hours. I'd like to come in, have them clean up the place, take some of this furniture, and we'll put it down in storage in the basement, if that's okay with you. We'll open up the floor plan just by removing the clutter. Then we're going to open up the drapes and let the sun shine in. Guys, I'm going to tell you, well-lit rooms are desirable. Dark rooms, not so much. And here's another thing. I'm going to buy for you. I actually do this sometimes for people. I'm going to repaint your entry vestibule for you in a color white or a light colored color. It brightens it up. Light reflects better through a light colored painted room. And when people come in, they'll get a much more warm feeling. And when we do an open house, if you could do me a favor, just take some cinnamon sticks, put them in a pot of water, turn it on a very low setting, and let the smell permeate the house. When people come in, they're like, smells like home, and it's light and bright, it's uncluttered, and what did you spend fixing up that property? Very little money. So you can get a very large return on a very small investment if you do it right. So increasing and diminishing returns are very important to understand how that can increase, or at least increase the perception of value. Then there's the principle of contribution. What does an item add to value in the property? I'm going to tell you right now, before we talk about items in property, a lot of people say a pool adds a lot of value. And in some instances, it does. If you're in Florida and you have a pool, well, that's expected because you can't live in Florida without a pool. But if there's an absence of a pool on a property being sold in Florida, the price tends to go down, and it's not very desirable because people need that thing. So the absence of that item could decrease its value. But in New Jersey, an in-ground pool is a neutral property value item. What? People pay a lot of money for pools. Some do. Some, I can't live in a house with a pool. I don't want my kids drowning in their own yard. So a pool can subtract from some people's proposition of value. I have one because my wife would have divorced me if I bought a house without a pool. And I got to tell you, it's a lot of work. And I just had more trees cut down because trees grow and block out the sun. And when that happens, the pool gets cold. So I got to do more maintenance, more expenditures. You got to add chemicals. You got to clean the pool out. You got to service the equipment. It's a lot of work. You got to open it in the spring, close it in the fall. It's a lot of work. I am the cabana boy. Yes, I admit really that I'm a cabana boy. But the fact is, guys, some people think that's all worth it. Some people, I don't want to be bothered with any of that. I would never buy a house with a pool. But what could be a contributing factor in a house that people would like? Number one, central air conditioning. Number two, open floor plans. Modern appliances, updated kitchens and bathrooms, well-lit areas, dynamic curb appeal, backyard living areas. Now, sometimes you have to have an actual entertainment area built into your backyard with kitchens and flat screen TVs and fireplaces and all kinds of things. But that's what people will pay extra for, so they contribute value to an item. Well, how much do I know the cost of the improvement versus the value proposition? That's every market is specific. Let's just take, for an example, a bedroom. How much does a bedroom add to value? Well, it depends on the market it's in. When I was younger, in the early 90s, I sold a lot of condos up in Society Hill in Mahwah, and that's a condominium complex of about 1,700 units. All the one bedrooms, exactly the same. All the two bedroom units, exactly the same. All the three bedrooms were townhouses, all exactly the same. The only difference was the location in the complex. All the one bedrooms at that time were selling for roughly $125,000 a piece. Two bedrooms, $175,000 a piece. Three bedrooms, $225,000. I could infer the contributing value of one added bedroom was about $50,000. $125, 175, $225. One bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom. The difference, one bedroom per price level, added about $50,000 per. So it was very easy in that specific market to know what a contributing factor is. When it comes to the greater type of market, neighborhoods or single family homes, of which could be many different styles, it's harder to put into words or a value proposition exactly how much an item contributes to value. So as a new person in real estate, you're going to need to rely on your broker and other experienced agents to help you understand contributing values of items and properties. Was there any questions before I move on? Apparently there's some, so I'll wait. What page was slide 2? That was page 276, 277. Anyone else lose connection? I don't know. So increasing and diminishing returns are closely related to contribution. Could be, yes, very well could be, Michael. Good point. What are some examples of absence that would decrease value? As I said, if the house is in Florida and has no pool, that actually decreases the value of that house compared to others in the neighborhoods that do have pools. That's an example. Would above ground pools decrease value? Not necessarily, because those could be removed very easily without a big expense, so it's not necessarily a negative thing. Who can advise the seller if the improvement will help the value? A good realtor will, or an appraiser, but a good realtor who knows the value of items and knows the markets can help understand contributing factors of items. But again, until you're experienced in the business, you're going to have to rely on your fellow realtors and your broker to help you with the value propositions of contributing items. Curb appeal, 20% value increase, so don't landscape more than 100,000 on a 500. Excellent point. Yeah, you want to use that as a guideline. Absolutely. Mean to say, is there a general list that items would improve? No, there is no general list. Every market is unique and specific. What plays in Baltimore doesn't play in Phoenix. It's an old saying. How about houses on main roads? Well, because of their location, that would be less desirable, most likely, than a house on a side road or cul-de-sac. So that would infer a value proposition, location. Like a kitchen, a new bathroom, a garden. Yes, there you go, David. Okay, I think I answered the questions, so I'm going to, I'll tell you what, I'm going to talk about competition. And then we're going to break for a coffee break, and we'll finish up with change and move on to the 3 approaches to value. So let's finish up this conversation, number 1, with competition. I live in Oakland, New Jersey. 8 different places just in Oakland make pizza. And every one of those joints wants my pizza dollar. They're all competing for my coveted pizza dollars. Not just that, I have outside of market influences. Domino's down in Pompton Lake says they'll deliver to my house in Oakland, and they want my pizza dollar. There's joints in Wyckoff and Franklin Lakes that will deliver to Oakland, so they send me flyers. They want me to spend my pizza dollar with them. So who do I spend my pizza dollar with? There's only one guy who makes pies in my town that I go to. Lucas makes the best pie, bar none, in my opinion, to all the others. But that's my opinion. But the fact is, they all want me to pay money to buy their pizzas. But what about the real estate markets, Tim? What kind of competition is there? It depends. What kind of market are you in? Right now, a seller's market where very few homes are available to buyers. Therefore, the competition amongst buyers is fierce. 4 or 5, 6 or 7 offers on a property that just came on the market, all over asking price offers. They're all competing for the limited supply of properties, which causes prices to go up. And as prices go up, other people start saying, "Ooh, if they're getting that, maybe I can get that," so their home may come on the market. The problem is, when a lot of money is being realized by sellers, that may attract ruinous competition. 17 homes in the same neighborhood all of a sudden hit the market because one guy sold for a lot of money. There goes the good returns because now buyers have more choices. Now the competition is amongst the sellers to get the buyer dollars. So competition says if there's profits, other people want to jump into the market and compete with you. The problem is if you're doing really well, it could attract ruinous competition, which will destroy the market in a certain area. Because now too many homes are on the market, buyers have too many choices, so they slow down and start negotiating, and people then have to drop prices, and now values start to decrease. Competition is a two-edged sword. It can give you very good profits, or ruinous competition could cause you to lose money. So be very aware of competition in specific markets. Was there any questions about the competition in a market or anything else we talked about? Not seeing any. I got to call Lucas and get a pizza later. Gee, okay. I'm going to do this, guys. I'm going to leave the conversation open. It's now 10:30. Let Lucas, used to be called Tony Brothers back in the day. Now it's called Lucas. I'm going to step away for a half hour. 11 o'clock to rejoin you. The conversation's open. Do whatever you want to talk about. And I will see you at 11 o'clock. Cheers. Okay, 11 o'clock, time to get started, guys. We were talking about the principles of value, and there was only one left we were going to talk about, and that was the principle of change. Tim, simple definition of substitution, also difference between increasing and decreasing returns versus contribution. Gary, guys, please. It's in your textbook. All you got to do is read it, Gary. I don't want to go back and start rehashing stuff again right now. We got a whole 3 chapters to get through. So I'm sure if you spend a couple minutes in rereading that stuff, you get a very good understanding of that. I do need to move on, however. I'm sorry if I don't spend time and rehash other topics, but we got to move on. The principle of change. So what changes and how does that affect real estate? Everything changes. In fact, the only constant there is in this universe is that things change. Markets change. The cost of money supply changes. Interest rates. Desirability of certain things change. Location preferences change. Demographics change. Politics change. Economies change. Attitudes change. Sudden changes occur. Slow changes occur, but change happens all the time. So let's concern ourselves with the economy. What's changed? Well, obviously, many things happened in the past year that came about suddenly and forcefully upon us. Unemployment skyrocketed because people couldn't go to work. That changed. People's desirability for urban locations has changed. In fact, many of the folks living in New York, as I said, are seeking the rural atmosphere to live in. So people are flooding to the rural sections of New Jersey to buy houses in droves. That changed in the last year. Telecommuting, 1 in 3 telecommuters today are projected to stay home telecommuting after this is over. So work environments are changing. Schools are changing. Look at us. We used to have to do in-person training. Now we do online training because then the state requires us to do that. People's preferences for different location changes constantly. People's preferences for amenities in a home changes. In 1930, if you were to buy a house, you would get a bedroom with maybe 1 or 2 electric outlets and 1 closet that fits maybe a few suits and maybe a couple pair of shoes. Today, the master bedroom probably has a dozen or 2 outlets in it, has a walk-in closet with all kinds of amenities. Things change from buyer preferences. Open floor plan designs are more desirable. But within the last year, compartmentalized offices within homes, so telecommuting affects that, has been more desirable. Multi-generational housing is becoming more of a desire today because the old folks can't afford to live in their home, kids can't get jobs, so we're all still living under one roof. Amenities in homes, backyard entertainment, and living areas has changed dramatically in the past several years. So many things change all the time, and that infers value changes as well. What was desirable is no longer desirable. What wasn't desirable is becoming more desirable. So things change all the time. Demographics change. Political influences could determine whether people remain or move out of areas. We're having a mass exodus out of New Jersey of residents because people are fed up and sick and tired of the amount of tax that they have to pay here in New Jersey. So these things are all changes that affect value. So the principles that we have discussed over the past hour or two have a direct impact on value in the real estate marketplace. Now, I'm going to switch gears and start talking about the 3 approaches to value, but before I do, Was there any follow-up conversations? And I don't want to go back and redefine everything again, guys. Was there any follow-up questions for what we've been talking about? Pure curiosity, where in the New Jersey Exeter is heading? Where states don't require such high taxes. Tennessee, Texas, Florida. Those are more desirable than high tax states. Maybe Mo follow up. Give the guy a break now. We teased him about it. So, anybody else with a comment before I move on? Or Ramey, you got your dialogue bar is open. You're asking a question, Ramey. Maybe not. Is there one principle of value more important than another? Yes, Sherry, there is. Supply and demand. That's the overriding value impactor. Supply and demand. And I would be remiss if I didn't say location is still extremely important when analyzing value. All right, so let's move on. When an appraiser is called to do an appraisal, depending on the property he's appraising, he may have a different approach to value. There is the sales comparison approach, most commonly used for single-family homes. It can be used for other types of homes, only if there's a preponderance of a good number of comparable homes to compare a property to. Then there's the cost approach, where you can't compare this structure to other properties, and it doesn't charge or doesn't show an income or profit, so you can't use that as a function of value. So the cost approach must be analyzed to determine value in today's markets. And then there's the income approach. For those properties that do produce income, like an investment property, then we can use that income to help determine its value. And we're going to walk through each one of these to get a better understanding. First, we're going to talk about the sales comparison approach. It is the same type of approach that a realtor uses when doing a CMA for single-family homes or condos. So how is this used? Well, first of all, an appraiser would do the same thing as, like I said, a realtor would do, and the realtor would do the same thing an appraiser does in the school. However, the realtor calls his report a CMA, and the appraiser calls his report an appraisal. The appraiser can charge a fee, and often does, for his appraisal, where a realtor cannot charge a fee for his CMA. In fact, it must say in the CMA, this is not an appraisal, so people are not confused. But it's the same approach that an appraiser uses, the sales comparison approach. So let's go through this. So someone has a property that wants to sell it. So I get a call one day. Hey, my name is, and I'm looking to sell my house. What do you guys charge for real estate fees? And would you look at my house to see if I can sell it? Well, first of all, Mr. Seller, to talk about fees is secondary. What I need to do first is find out about your house. Can you tell me a little bit about your house? And then I'm going to come over and take a look-see at it, and then develop a pricing proposition called a CMA, comparative market analysis. The appraiser, on the other hand, just gets the information, goes and see the house, and says, I'll prepare the appraisal back at my office. Either way, we're going to take the approach that, let's say I'm a real estate appraiser doing the job. So what first I'm going to ask is, what is the purpose of the appraisal request? To sell the house? Okay, then I know what I'm appraising for. But if that seller had said, I have an insurance settlement, I need to know about loss of value, so I need to do a before and after study of the property to find out what its value was before the occurrence of the problem, and then what's after the problem to determine the loss. So there's different purposes for appraisers, just say appraisals. But anyway, the appraisal gets the order. And he finds out that this is a 4-bedroom home, 2.5 baths, and it's a center hall colonial, and it has a full finished basement, an FFB. This is a bath. This is a bedroom, bath, BTH. Center hall, colonial. Full finished bath. Full finished basement. 2-car garage, or CG. Let's just leave that. And about a half. And I said about a half-acre property. That's what I know about the property right now. 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, center hall colonial, full finished basement, 2-car garage, and a half-acre property. That's pretty much enough to know. There is more I would want to know so I can compare apples to apples. So now I get an idea of the property and its moderate condition. ModCon. Moderate condition. It's not brand new and all updated. It needs some work, but it's not in disgusting condition. It's in a moderate condition. So now what I have to do is, this is called the subject property. The subject property is one I want to assign a value to. So what I have to do is, in that town, find comparable properties to the one that was looking to be priced. So those are called comps or comparables. So I look for 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, center hall colonials with a full finished basement, 2-car garage, 1.5 acre property in moderate condition. But you know and I know that when I do a computer search, the more criteria I enter, very few results may be results. So I'm going to limit my search criteria to just a couple things. Now, where am I searching for this information? In the multiple listing service in the area where the property is located. So I go and visit the subject property and get a full detailed description and see it. Then I go into my multiple listing service and enter into the CMA program. All members of MLS have this. Your broker may have their own apps or access, and they'll probably want you to use those because they're branded and things like that. But for an appraiser, if he joins an MLS, and they often do, they can get this information by entering their search criteria. So first, the appraiser is going to look for active properties on the market that are just like the subject property, as much as he can find. Then he's going to do a secondary search for sold properties in the market where that property is located to find out what they sold for that are much like the house being in question. And then they're going to look for expired listings in the area to find out what prices and conditions existed and why houses didn't sell. So they do a search of the comps. In order to be, let's say this is in North Vale. All right, that's where the property is, North Vale. You know where Callahan's is? You've been to Callahan's? All right, North Vale. So they're going to say, okay, let me look at houses that are just like this property in that town that are currently on the market for sale. They're active. So he enters in very brief criteria. 4-bedroom house, North Vale. He gets, let's say, 27 responses. And then starts adding in criteria. Center hall colonial, 20 responses. 2.5 baths, 18. Full finished basement, 12. 2-car attached garage, 10. Half-acre property, 7. Stop. Anytime you get results of between, so say, 4 and 10, that's optimal. 7, perfect number, right in the middle someplace. So now I have 7 properties that meet this property's conditions, all categories except the condition. Everything else is exactly the same. It's in the same town, sometimes in the same street or neighborhood. It has 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, center hall colonial, full finished basement, 2-car garage, and a half-acre property. Very much like the subject property. I have 7 active comparables that I'm going to need to figure out how comparable are they. So I go through the list and, yep, meets. But wait a minute. I got 5 of those 7 are in superior condition because they're brand new inside. They remodeled the inside for the market. So they got new kitchens and baths and fresh paint, and boy, it just looks so much nicer. Therefore, this is going to be a superior property. It's better than the subject property. Because of that, I now understand the asking price is going to be higher than the subject property. So I'm going to have to adjust the price downwards to meet the moderate condition criteria as if it were the subject property, and subtract from value through understanding what contributing values are for condition. So now that I get an X value. Two of the properties are in really poor condition. They're inferior. And because they're inferior, I have to price them as if they were similar to the subject property. So I have to add value to those properties until I come to a final active sales price of what that property would sell for if it was just like the subject property. Once I determine that, I can determine a price, Mr. Seller, that I would expect your property to command if we were in a similar market to these houses, and they are. So we could probably say your house should be valued somewhere around X amount of dollars to sell in today's market. That's what we'd expect buyers to pay for it. But that's just one search. Then I've got to go in and do a search of sold properties that are like the subject property. So I do the same size criteria again. I come down to several comparables. Some are superior, which means I've got to minus out value. Some are inferior, which means I have to add value until I come to some sort of pricing so I can determine what prices would sell for, what those houses sold would sell for if they were just like yours. So we figure out that. And then I'm going to do a search of expired listings and find out what their asking prices were, as well as the number of days on market, DOM, days on market. These indicate to me why that house didn't sell. The house was on the market for 375 days and asking too much money. That's why it didn't sell. Or if it seems to be priced correctly, what's the pricing history? Well, it was on the market for 425 days, 375 days of that 425, they were listed much higher and then reduced the price. By that time, it was worn, it was weary, it was no longer new and exciting, and people forgot about it and expired from the market. Now I have value propositions to report to that seller, the subject property, as to what prices should be if these comparable properties that are on the market and recently sold were just like the subject property. So now I could suggest a listing price where the buyers should show interest and want to buy that property. So an appraiser would do this process to give a value proposition to a seller to help them understand what the current market conditions are, what current active homes like theirs are asking, what current prices that they should expect from homes that are similar that recently sold to infer a sales price on my property, and why properties didn't sell. So that person now has a value proposition based on comparable values in the marketplace. Now, that was a very quick, down and dirty description of a sales comparison approach. Again, if you pre-read this, you already know what I'm talking about. If you didn't, this is all brand new and you're questioning many things. So what questions do you have about a sales comparison approach? Is this the same process that a real estate agent has to do when the buyer asks for comps in the area of a possible home? Exactly the same. What if some of those houses sold due to the seller being under pressure? Well, then we would note that on the report as a little asterisk. This house sold because there was a divorce and they were under pressure to sell. Therefore, the resulting sale price would be less. Therefore, if they weren't under duress, we could probably add about, let's say, $50,000 of value, or whatever the case may be. Yes, we did go over this last week, but again, this is another chapter with another interpretation, and that's why we're going over it again. It is a lot of work here, in fact, and I'm going to, obviously no more questions, so I'm going to moderate. An agent looking to list property spends a lot of time developing potential clients who want to sell their house. And then when they do want to sell, you got to do a lot of work to find out what that house is worth in today's market. You won't know how to do this unless you get trained by your broker and the people at the multiple listing service. They'll actually hold classes for you, but you got to go and learn. If you don't, you won't know how to price property and you'll fail terribly in your job. One of the more important traits of a salesperson today is knowing how to price property correctly for the market that we're in. If you become good at this, guys, the sky's the limit, I'm telling you. But if you don't know how to price properties for the markets, you're not going to be able to do business. When representing buyers, you need to know how to come about analyzing a property to see if that's priced right or not for the buyer. So understand, guys, doing a CMA as a realtor is very important to your skill sets. Very important. To an appraiser, it's his job. That's what he has to do, to know value. All right, so sales comparison approach is the first way that an appraiser could analyze property for value, and this is most appropriate for residential properties where you can compare across a market for competitive houses that have sold, that are on the market, to the one that's being the subject property. Moving on, the second type of sales, the approach to value is called the cost approach. Now, this is much more involved. And I'm going to tell you right now, you probably will not do a cost approach to valuation. But if you did, it's a lot of work. And I'm talking a lot of work. First of all, a cost approach is for a building that you cannot compare to other buildings. So the sales comparison approach is not going to be appropriate. Let's say it's a unique style building, a church. So a sales comparison approach wouldn't work because I need a good number of churches in the same location or area that are currently on the market and seeing what they're asking for sale, and recently sold churches within the last 6 months or so of what churches sold in the area that I can compare it to. And guess what? This is the only church around for like 50 miles. How am I going to compare it to something that's not there? I can't. So I can't use a sales comparison approach. Because a church is nonprofit, it does not declare income. Therefore, I can't use the income approach, the third way of determining value. So I'm going to have to come up with some way to value this property. So here's the thing I have to do. First off, I'm going to have to find out what is the value, current value assessment on the property from their tax bill. Hopefully it's a recent valuation. And if it is, I can automatically look at the tax bill and determine what the value of the land is. And that's usually a constant value. Not always, but it does value, but it does change. But let's say I look at the tax bill, and on this property, let's say the total, didn't do that. Let's say the total value for the land and improved value was 1.3 million. But I need to know what are the contributing factors here. Well, the improvement is worth $830,000. That means the land value for tax assessed purposes is $500,000. So now that I know the different contributing values to the overall value, I back out the land value from the equation and only deal with the improved value. Now that's according to the tax assessor on this property, but I could care less about the current value, tell you the truth. So I'm going to just go on the fact that I'm going to back out the land value, and I'm going to have to create this value today. This would be of the current value based on tax assessment, but that might not be the retail value for reselling the house. So I have to back out the land value from the total value of the project. Then construct that building with using the same material, same technique, same labor that was used to create the building, to build it in the first place. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to have to get a list of all the material that was used in constructing the building. Then I'm going to have to go to my supply store and find out what the current cost of that material would be. And if it's not made anymore, what's the modern equivalent so I can use that as a product to build a new house? Then I need to know how much the labor bills were when the building was built. Then I have to consider what the current or new labor bill would be by building it today. I'm going to tell you right now, the labor bills have skyrocketed. In most areas in this area, doubled over the past 10 years. Wow. So once I determine what it would cost to build this property by all of the component parts and all of the labor, then I have to reduce the value by what's called accrued depreciation. There's wear and tear, there's functional obsolescence, there's external obsolescence. We're going to talk about those in a few minutes. But anyway, the current property has a loss in value due to, number one, wear and tear, and maybe other contributing factors. Therefore, I would deduct depreciation from estimating the cost of building a new building, add back in the land value to come up with a current value. Well, that sounds pretty simple, but pretty complicated. It is. Well, first we'll understand, remember that diamond ring that you ladies got and you went to get an insurance policy? And I said you can either get a replacement cost or reproduction cost. The reproduction cost is the exact duplicate of the same building in question at today's cost, though. Replacement is just constructing the cost of a new building to serve the purpose of replacing the building without duplicating it in all ways. So there's a value proposition that's different right here. Then using either square foot methods or unit in place methods, or what they call a quantity survey methods. These are all builders' estimates of value, how they price projects out, or an index method. I would have to come up with the cost of building the same property. But when I first determine what the cost of the building today would be, then I have to minus out losses due to depreciation. Wear and tear. Mr. Building Owner, currently, I'm going to tell you, the siding is in bad shape. You put T111 siding, it's all warm. You got to replace that. It's $20,000 loss of value in today's dollars. You also have what's called functional obsolescence. What the hell is that? Functional obsolescence is a loss of value due to something being outdated or no longer applicable, or it doesn't work the same way it does today. Is it Little Falls or Totowa, when you come south out of Patterson on Union Boulevard and cross over 3 and Route 80, you further proceed south, you come to a stoplight, and there's a river just after that you go over, and then another intersection. Well, on that river, if you look to the right, there's this big brick building called the Mills. And the Mills, back in the 1800s, was a factory, embroidery factory, I believe. And it worked very well for manufacturing materials. But today, it can't be used in the same function. It's lost its usability. Today, manufacturing facilities are modern, well lit, open floor plans, no columns, no what. It's very open. So it doesn't really work the same way. So functionally, that building lost value because you can't use it in the same way it was created for. However, someone said that would make great condos. So they repurposed the building, and now the Mills is a condo complex. Really kind of neat. If you're familiar with the area, I think you know what I'm talking about. But the thing is this. Functionally, the original building lost value because they can't use it for the same purpose anymore. Same thing can happen in other types of buildings. Doesn't work the same anymore and loses value. So if that's the case, then we have to lose value due to functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence could also be considered where, let's say, a residential house has 5 bedrooms, but 1 bathroom. Well, that doesn't work very well, especially you got at least 5 people in the house. 1 bathroom's never going to suffice. Therefore, functionally, it loses value unless you were to add another bathroom. Then it wouldn't be obsolete anymore. It would have more value. So you can lose value through physical deterioration, wear and tear, or through functional obsolescence, where it doesn't serve the same purpose anymore and is not used that way, or through what's known as external or economic obsolescence, which is, by the way, always incurable. These are items that occur outside of the property borders that affect the value of the property today, and maybe it's in a negative way. And I'm not trying to be derogatory or anything, but let's take a building, let's say in West Milford. West Milford is a beautiful town, very large, very rural. There's a nice downtown area. They've recently done some really good improvements to the downtown area, but still a very large and rural area. The problem is in West Milford, it's in Passaic County, which is affected by the New Jersey Highlands Planning and Protection Act, which means no future development can occur unless a property was subdivided prior to 2004. So if you were lucky enough to subdivide your property before 2004, you can continue to develop that land and add units. But if you hadn't, you could never then subdivide your property after 2004, which means very limited growth in the area. And because there's very limited growth, and since government bills go up, your taxes are going to raise, that means each homeowner is going to have to pay more and more in their tax bill. That would be an external factor contributing to a loss of value, because the more you pay in taxes, the less you have to pay for a mortgage. Simple math. So you have physical deterioration, loss due to wear and tear. Functional obsolescence due to not being able to use it for the same purpose. Or external obsolescence, something that affects the value that happens off-site of the property. So a cost approach would consider all these things to determine a current value for the building today. And again, this is usually for unique style buildings, one-of-a-kind structures. Was there any question about this sales comparison approach or the cost approach of properties? What's most important for us to know about cost approach? That it's very difficult to do. It takes a lot of knowledge about markets and patience, because you have to do a lot of research and a lot of figuring out of values. I didn't understand why you need to use a cost approach as opposed to appraisal approach. It is an appraisal approach. There are 3 appraisal approaches to value: sales comparison approach, cost approach, of which we're talking about now, and the income approach, which we'll talk about in about 5 minutes. So it is a form of an appraisal. So why would do this in houses like Cape May? So I'm sorry, Luciana. So why would you do this in a house like in Cape May? Well, you wouldn't. You'd do a sales comparison approach. If I'm reading your question correct, maybe I'm not. I've driven past that building before that you mentioned in the example. It's within proximity of my town. Can you show 2 and 3 again? Guys, it's directly taken from your book. All this information the PowerPoint is directly taken from your book. So I'm not going to go rehash again. It's directly taken from your book. Are cost approaches usually more rewarding in terms of selling them? Are cost approaches usually more rewarding in terms of not understanding. Oh, as far as mean when selling property? I'm not sure what your question is, Dante. Kira, will we learn more about Passaic County, New Jersey Highlands Act? Yes, we will. Dante, yes. Are environmental restrictions like, say, unable to dig for foundation and external obstacles? Yes, it could be, Gary. You may have a moratorium on building, which means you can't build. Well, then how are you going to replicate that property in a different location? You can't. It has to be for the exact same property you're talking about. So we're going to be talking about the cost approach as a method of an appraisal of value. So again, limiting limitations, laws that are enacted could prevent someone from building another one, limiting competition, but again, making your home even more unique. Cost approach sounds like mainly used for commercial or unique property, is not used for residential. Most likely correct, Ramey, for unique style, one-of-a-kind properties is what the cost approach is for. So I think I answered the questions, so I'm going to move on. Then there's the income approach to value. All right. We're going to be discussing terms and concepts some of you have never heard about before. But the income approach to value is the third appraisal approach to value. There was the sales comparison approach, there was the cost approach, and now there's the income approach to value. Meaning, the income produced by the property may be an indicator of its value, and most likely can be used as a function to determine value. So I'm going to just pull up a whiteboard here for a minute and draw a little diagram. IRV. This is a mathematical proposal you see in front of you, IRV. I stands for income. R stands for rate. And V stands for value. By looking at this diagram, you see that there's this letter over this letter with a line between it, which means divide. If two numbers are next to each other, that means multiply. So here are the formulas from IRV. Income equals rate times value. Rate equals income divided by value. And value equals income divided by rate. What do I have to know more about this stuff, Tim? Because you may get a question about how to determine value using the income approach on your test. And I want to make sure you have the mathematical formulas to do that. Now, if you're looking for more information, chapter 22 in your book has all discussions about math. And if you were to turn to chapter 22, you'll find that IRV is introduced on page 375, income, rate, and value. And it gives you several parameters about how this is to be used. Just before that, you see PBR, and it's all about Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, which, oh, no, I'm sorry, Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, that's not it. PBR, those are other examples where P stands for part, B stands for base, and V stands for value. And if you read chapter 22, you'll get a very in-depth discussion on how to use these formulas to solve probably 85% of your math questions you're going to get. But we're talking now, right now, about IRV. Income rate, which is typically the cap rate or capitalization rate in a marketplace. And V for value, which means the current sale price of properties. So if I know two, I can get the third. So if I know what income to charge on a property, I can use the cap rate divided by value, and it will determine how much income I should generate on a property. If I know what the income is and the recent sold price of it, I can determine what the cap rate in that area would be. And if I know the income and the cap rate, then I can infer what that property's value when it comes time to sell would be. So knowing 2 out of the 3, I can solve for value if I know income and cap rate. So what income and what's a cap rate is what the questions are. Well, on page 283, if you'll please turn to that page, on the top section, 16.3, it gives you looks like an operating statement of a property, income and expense reporting. That's an operating statement, income and expense. This is a yearly income and expense report. I'm just going to run through it real quickly. Up top is the income it produces, the potential gross income, plus other sources of income, less the vacancy rate. Then all the yearly expenses are enumerated and then subtracted from the effective gross income to result in what is known, as the annualized or annual net operating income. The annual net operating income, ANOI. That is the income in ERV. So I need to determine what that is before I can set valuation on property. So how do I determine what the annual income is? By taking the annual income less vacancy rate and then subtracting out the annual expenses before debt service to determine what the annual net operating income is. Once I know that, I can now proceed. If I know what the cap rate in an area is, then I can determine value, because the income, the annual net operating income, would be divided by the capitalization rate. That's a cap rate, they call it, cap rate. So where do I get the cap rates for marketplaces? Well, that's a good question. And I will tell you this, in the markets right now, cap rates are out the window. What? Because of the problem of supply and demand, investors are gobbling up investment or income producing properties at a rate unforeseen before. And because they create income, they have value. But let's take the example of a, quote, more normal market. Cap rates are specific to geographic areas. The cap rate for certain properties in West Orange is going to be different than the cap rate in Camden, which is different from the cap rate in Trenton, which is different from the cap rate in Paramus, which is different from the cap rate in Mendham. Every region has their own cap rates for types of industry or types of buildings. Your broker should be aware of what current cap rates are in certain areas in a normal market. So you'll be able to understand the cap rate. So now that I can determine what the annualized net operating income is, and my broker tells me what the cap rate is, then I can determine the value of what this property should sell for. I know this is a lot of information in a very short period of time, but if you had pre-read this material, I'm already discussing stuff you already know about. If you haven't, this is all brand new and you're going to have a million questions. That's why it's so important to pre-read this stuff before you come to class. So let's use the approach of income approach as directed in the book on page 282, where in the income approach under the 1, 2, 3, the fourth bullet item, it gives you some parameters. I'm going to bring up a white page, another one. And it says that the annual net income on a property is $15,000. And that the value it sold for was $187,500. Well, knowing those two, I can solve for cap rate. Remember, rate equals income divided by value. So income divided by value would give me a cap rate of 8%. There's your ERV. There's the three equations. I know two, I can solve for the third. In fact, if I use the same parameters, I can say, well, income divided by rate would equal the value then. And actually, if you divide 15,000 by 8, it comes out to 187,500. Huh. If I know what the rate is and the sale price, then I can determine what I should generate as income. So 8%, 8 times 187.5 would give me a resulting $15,000 in income. 8%, not 8% times. So these things actually do work out. Maybe you only know one thing in a certain area. Well, then you're going to have to do some research. You're going to have to find out what current properties are selling for that are slightly similar to this property, analyze their income, and if you see the sales price and know the income, then you can develop a cap rate, which you can apply to the subject property to determine value of that property. So this is really not rocket science. It's just a matter of knowing what formula to use and what information goes into the formula. That's all. ERV is your friend. ERV will help you figure out math questions that you are going to get on your test when it comes to valuing a property using the income approach. Remember ERV. So in essence, that's the effect of the income against rate and against value and vice versa. All three ways. That's one way to use income to qualify what the value of the property would be or quantify. Another way would be using what's called the gross rent multiplier. So in this case, ERV is out the window. Forget ERV. However, what I need to know is what is the gross monthly rent that the property produces? If I know that, then I can determine other parameters. If I know what the property sold for, then it would be much better or easier for me to determine what the income should be, or what the gross rent multiplier would be. On the bottom of page 283, it gives you that information. So here's an example where a property, and I'll use the whiteboard again to compare. The property sold for $200,000. Okay. That's the value. The gross monthly rent was $1,400. So the sales price divided by the rent equals the gross rent multiplier of 142.86 as the gross rent multiplier. Knowing that, then I can go out to any building by finding out what its income is and multiplying it times the gross rent multiplier. What the gross monthly rent is, gross monthly rent, times the gross rent multiplier, the GRM, will give me what the value of the property would be. You can use either way, and it would be very close to helping you estimate value of property using the income approach. Now, again, this is a very cursory overview. You don't have to know and do everything by the book. However, if you know these definitions and concepts, you'll pass the exam. Other than that, everything else is going to be fluff. So was there any question about the income approach to value before we move on? Well, it's just going to use a calculator. You betcha. But you can't use your phone as a calculator. And it must be a simple calculator, just so you know. Will you go over this again in chapter? We don't do chapter 22, Gary. Chapter 22 is for your own personal study. The Real Estate Commission believes that by the time you're 18, you know math concepts, and we are not instructing math concepts here. We're not required to instruct math. So math is not part of your learning experience. That's something you should know about. And if you don't, you can read chapter 22 and get that information. Let's see. What does the less vacancy and collection losses estimated at 4% mean? Vacancy is what we lose from rent collection because the property is not occupied and doesn't produce income. That's what it's talking about. What is considered a good GRM? Depends on the area, Robert. There is no standard. Wait, how is the value determined using gross rent multiplier? By taking the gross monthly rent and multiplying it times the gross rent multiplier will determine value. Why are CMAs free and appraisals come? Boy, where have you been, Brianna? We talked about that an hour ago. Whew. And by the way, and I said, Brianna, just to repeat again, realtors can't charge for their CMAs. They are free. Appraisers require a fee to be paid. A CMA must say this is not an appraisal, even though it may mean the same thing. CMAs are not mandatory. You can roll the dice and see how you can do. That's a very, very bad approach to value. Does a CMA increase a broker's fee? No, it's free. So the cap rate is essentially equates to value. The cap rate equates, I'm sorry, Mindy. So the cap rate is essentially equates to value true. I'm not sure what that's saying or asking. Well, Chapter 22 is not required because the Real Estate Commission believes you should know math by the time you are 18 years of age. And I don't want to get into that discussion, guys. What is considered a good cap rate? Depends on the area, Robert, and every area is different. Is net operating income versus cash flow the same? Net operating income, no, it's different. Cash flow is what's left after debt service has been paid. Net operating income is before debt service is paid. The higher the cap rate means the more value the property has, right? No, Mindy. Think about what you just said. I'm going to moderate here. The higher the cap rate, the lower the value. The lower the cap rate, the higher the value. That's a fact, Jack. I hate to say that, but that's a fact. It's just the way math works. Monthly income used to residential property and annual income for commercial? No. Net operating income or gross monthly rent, either one. And use the right approach because you don't want to use gross monthly rent times cap rate. That wouldn't work. Anybody else with a question before we move on? Some of you guys are scratching your head, and that's fine. Math isn't for everybody, and use the income approach. And besides, you're not going to be studying to become appraisers. However, it would be handy to help understand how value propositions are created for properties that are not single-family homes. Just saying. All right, not seeing any more questions. Let me moderate and move on. Reconciliation is the art of analyzing and weighing the different approaches to value that an appraiser does. An appraiser may take all three approaches to value to determine value and come up with 3 different propositions of value, which he then must reconcile. Just like your checkbook, you got to go through it and make sure things make sense at the end of the month, right? Well, an appraiser has to reconcile slight differences in value propositions to create one conclusive and cohesive value proposition to the client. So reconciliation is when an appraiser uses more than one approach to value and then concludes value based on their reconciliation. Appraising is conducted by licensed and certified appraisers. As I said, you can either be a fee appraiser, independent for hire, or a staff appraiser, meaning hired by a company to perform appraisals for just their purposes. Generally, all appraisers must be licensed and or certified as appraisers to do appraisals. The CMA is what the realtor performs a comparative market analysis using the approaches that an appraiser uses, but we don't charge for it. And we have to say in the body of the CMA, this is not an appraisal, so people don't get it confused. There's many different reasons why people get appraisals: estate purposes, for planning, or settlements, divorce proceedings. Here's a hint, guys, and please, if you're sleeping, wake up and listen. If you know an attorney who handles divorce or estate planning, that may be a source of a lot of business for you. A divorce may require that the judge has determined that the house must be sold and the profits split between husband and wife and the spouses. In that case, who's that attorney going to call? Wouldn't you like to be friends with that divorce or estate attorney to get those calls? And yeah, you can get a nice flow of business out of that. I knew one guy who was an attorney in West Orange, and we became friends, and he kept giving me leads. And one day he calls me and goes, I'm taking your real estate class because I'm losing a lot of money giving it to you to sell. You son of a gun. Yeah, and he cut me off. But that was the source of a lot of income for me over the years. For financing purposes, banks want to know what the appraised value is for loan purposes. So for financing, an appraisal must be called for. Taxation, assessment of value will determine taxes paid by a homeowner. Relocation, yeah, if you're relocating from one area to the other, you need to know what your house's value is so you can plan on what the purchase price you'll have to be able to afford to buy a new house in a new area. Condemnation, when the state comes in and says we're taking your house under eminent domain by a legal process known as condemnation, they have to value the house. So an appraisal would be required to give just compensation to the owner. Insurance loss, before and after valuations to determine insurance loss from damage loss, etc. And feasibility studies sometimes call for appraisals as well. Now, the appraisal process, of which we're going to finish up on, and then after lunch talk about the profession, the schooling, and then we'll do the reviews. The appraisal process is this. Number one, what is the purpose? What's the problem? Why do you need to have an appraisal done? I'm getting divorced. So now I know you're looking for market value. Or I'm refinancing, so I need to value the property in lieu of the loan amount. So first we'll state the problem, appraisal for this purpose. Then I'm going to list the data items I need and find out the resources where I'm going to need to go to get information. I'm going to gather those records and verify the necessary data, go visit the property and do a physical inspection both outside and inside the property to get a full understanding of it. Determine its highest and best use, estimate the land value, and then estimate the value based on each of the three approaches to value. Then when done, reconcile the differences of the estimated values to form a conclusive report, then finalize that report, give it to the client, and then you can get paid for doing your job as an appraiser. Any questions about the process? Very quickly, very easy to understand. Is the appraisal process public data? Like can we find out that it is because of a divorce? No, it's not. It's not. It's not public. You can hire an appraiser for anything. You don't have to let the public know why you're getting an item valued. No, it's not public. Kelly, you had a question? Every time I see the word Kelly, I have a sister-in-law, Kelly. I always think of Woody Harrelson in the TV show Cheers when he sang the Kelly song. You guys remember that? Kelly, 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 oh, Kelly. Oh, boy, sorry, I had to do that. Situation requiring appraisal equals feasibility. Don't Understand this. Sometimes communities need to do a feasibility study to see if something is worth investing in. Maybe a company is deciding to expand its operation. There's a feasibility study to see what it would cost to add a real estate item to their portfolio. So we need to have an appraised to find out what it would cost, what the values are, what a resale value would be, things like that. You remember that song? Yeah, it was a long time ago. What's considered a good cap rate? Again, there is no standard rates, guys. It's every area is particular to the other. Why knowing the problem, reason for appraisal is important to determine how you're going to approach the problem. I need my ring insured for replication purposes. I'm going to come up with a different value than I would for if it was just a replacement value. So I need to understand the problem before I do the appraisal. Okay, guys, guess what? It's 12 o'clock. And it's time to take a lunch break. However, as soon as I close down within the next minute or so, Noel or Lauren most likely is going to come on and talk to you about any administrative questions you may have. So please, if you do have questions, don't go away and return 20 minutes from now and expect that they're going to be here and answer your questions. Stick around so that you don't have to repeat the answers over and over again. So in the next minute or two, they'll come on, and at 1 o'clock, I'll be back, and we'll move on from there. So I'll see you at 1.
Hello, everybody. Happy. My bun is lopsided. Anyway, what's today? Today is Wednesday. Happy hump day. Happy hump day, everybody. We're halfway through the week. Woohoo! Anyway, hi, guys. My name is Lauren. I am the education coordinator for the school, and I hop on every day at lunchtime to answer any administrative questions that you may have. So I am going to be doing my giveaway today. Give me one moment. I'm going to grab a textbook. Today is giveaway day, guys. Woo! I get so excited when I get to do these with you because I have a ton of fun. So with the giveaway, I will be giving away some free success classes. We will be doing the success class tomorrow on Thursday. If you were a winner of last week's success class, then you're still going to receive the email today. So even if you were to win, it's nothing in addition. It's not like you get 2 classes. Does that make sense? Okay. So I am going to moderate the chat really quickly just so I can catch up on questions because I was just yapping away. And let's see. Okay. Hi, Lauren. Was wondering if I could register for this weekend's New York class if it was included in my packet. You sure can. Send an email over to info or give us a call. Hi, is there a summary of our journey process? Like we do 10 classes, then take a trial test and schedule real estate tests and summary of all our okay. So there isn't, but I can give it to you by word of mouth. So I can tell you that the process is of your journey is you register for the class, you complete all 21 of your chapters, then you go ahead and what? Oh, wow, I have the chat moderated, so never mind. I was going to ask the question, but so then you go ahead and schedule your school exam. Once you schedule your school exam, you will then need to pass by a 70%. After you pass, after you pass by a 70%, you will then be uploaded into the state system. I'm sorry, these phones are going crazy. I have to turn them off. Sorry. Let me turn the other one off. Give me a moment because I see that it is, I don't want it to affect, I'm going to unmoderate the chat actually to let the questions come in. I don't want the phones to affect our Q&A or our giveaway. Hi, I will be finishing up on Friday. What do I need to do to register for the school test? Well, if you are finishing up on Friday, you just go ahead to, let me put the link. I'm sorry, I'm also trying to prepare for our giveaway. Oh, actually, first question, no, I'm kidding. I sing this song, I think it's every Friday. recareercenter.com/test is where you will go to register for your school exam. So my first teaser question is, what song do I sing every Friday? Every Friday I get on here and I sing the same song and I always say, do you guys remember that? And a lot of you guys do. So I think it's hysterical. Okay, so is the state test offered on the weekends? Yes, it is 24/7. On Friday after the test review, will the school exam take place? So Charles, you have to register for the school exam. So once you complete all 21 of your chapters, you will then be able to register for the school exam. Once you register for the school exam, you'll receive an email with your username and your login. And then at that point in time, you will be able to sign on and take it whenever you're ready. Hi, Lauren. I have completed my hours for the course. Yay! I am ready to sign up for the school exam and need to provide my address. I bought a house in New Jersey last year, but have not had my license changed from New York yet. Should I provide my current address or should I use my... So I would use whichever address is on your identification, just to avoid confusion. So if your ID is a New York ID, I would use that. Just because you want everything, you want all your documents to match. So you can take the test whenever you're ready, any day after you finish the course. That is correct. How soon can I schedule for the exam? So I do see the questions coming in. I do want to let you guys know that. So I have a limited amount of time for the giveaway. I answer these same questions every day. So we should know majority of these answers already because it is now Wednesday and I've answered the same questions for the last every time I get on here. So I would love to be able to do a giveaway, but if we run out of time, then we run out of time. How soon can I schedule the exam? So guys, you can schedule the exam once you are at chapter 20 out of 21. As long as you complete all 21 of your chapters, you will be okay. Okay? So schedule your exam once you reach chapter 20. You are not allowed to break when you start your school exam. Once you start, you cannot pause or stop. You are not allowed to break at all. Is it possible for me to do both evening and day courses? Yes, it is. Hi, Lauren. If we pay $160 for a license before July 1st, will we have to pay $100 after that to renew? Is that correct? So, Michael, I believe so, but that would be a question for your instructor, because I honestly get the answers from Tim as well because he is awesome. Ha! Jesus! Jesus! Jesus Rodriguez, you won a free course. I'm writing your name down. I didn't even think anybody heard that. And you're awesome for paying attention to that. That made me so happy. You know, I had a ton of pens in here, and I'm pretty sure between Elise and Shamima, they're stealing my pens, but that's okay. Oh, Jesus, that made me so happy. Okay, so Jesus, Rod. Ha, that's funny. Do I have to complete the New Jersey course? Do I have to complete the New Jersey class courses and take the test before I can do New York? So yes, you have to complete New York because New Jersey, because if you don't have the education requirements, then the education waiver is pointless. So yes, you do have to complete New Jersey. Can we schedule the exam? And so I answered when we can schedule the exam. Laura Sanderson, my darling, you're going to go to recareercenter.com/test to register. If you do not pass the school exam, you can retake immediately. Wendy Williams show theme. Congrats, Jesus.